welcome back to Food Prep Guide. We are back in the kitchen today with another preservation video. This time it's all about pumpkins. We are going to learn how to dehydrate them in order to powder them, in order to use them in a special delicious recipe that's designed to stretch your family's meals and feed their bellies on a budget. So obviously we need a pumpkin. Now most pumpkins have a flat spot that's or at least flatter than the rest of the pumpkin. That's where it sat on the ground for a while. You want to put that flat spot down in order to start the cutting process. Now, I have processed a lot of pumpkins this way, and I can tell you the level of difficulty in cutting the pumpkin varies between pumpkins. Some of them are easy peasy. Some of them I am struggling to get this cut. But the good news is cutting the pumpkin is the hardest part of this whole process. Once you get past that, it's a breeze, very easy. You don't even have to peel it. Now, because we're not peeling the pumpkin, you do want to wash it really good. If mine looks wet, that's because I just got done washing it. And if you have a produce spray, like a diluted vinegar produce wash or a food grade hydrogen peroxide produce wash, you might want to do that too, since we are using the peel. Oh, and we're making a puree. But I'll show you how to get to that in a minute. Okay, now that we're in the seeds, you can use either a large spoon. I like to use an ice cream scoop. It works a lot better, a lot faster. You're going to need a bowl to put all the guts in. Now we have chickens, and chickens love pumpkin and pumpkin seeds, so that's where these are going. But you could also roast the seeds in the oven about 425 degrees until they're nice and dark. It's okay for little stringy bits to be in there. That's not an issue, but you do want to make sure to get all the seeds out. So all you need to puree a pumpkin is a pressure cooker, like an Instant Pot, some water, and a trivet. I have a silicone one, but you can use a metal one or just anything that lifts the food off the bottom of the pot so that you don't burn it. And you want to pour about a quart of water just to keep the pumpkin from burning on the bottom. Okay, I'm going to scoop this over here out of the way. And as I cut, I'll just start placing them in the pressure cooker. Okay, so we want to chop off the stems, both the bottom and the top, and then you want to chop off any big blemishes or anything like that. I don't think this one had too many blemishes. You can see this spot right here. It's like scabbing. That's not a big deal. So I'm not even going to worry about cutting that off. But I do want to cut that off, so just start cutting it into slices. Okay, so I have reached the maximum fill line on my pressure cooker. So I'm just going to put this guy in the fridge and he can get processed tomorrow. You are going to want to lock your lid, set it to airtight so you don't have any exhaust. And if you have a full load, you're going to want to go for 15 minutes, pressure cooker for 15 minutes. If you have a smaller, like one of those sweet pie pumpkins, then you would probably only want to pressure cook it for about 10 minutes. But a full load, pressure cook for 15 minutes. There we go, we're good to go. The next step is to puree it, and I will show you that step in a minute. Okay, the pressure cooker has just finished. You can do a natural release for about 5 minutes, and then you can go ahead and release the pressure. Of course, stand back when you do that, wear an oven mitt glove. But once it's done, it's going to be really hot. We're just going to use a pair of tongs and place it in a blender. So you will need a blender for this and a pair of tongs. You don't have to add any water to the bottom of your blender because the pumpkin contains plenty of moisture. I usually have to do this in 2 or 3 different batches. We don't want to get it too full. I'm going to go ahead and stop there. and then just blend it up until until you have a pureed consistency. Okay, I can tell it's nice and done. Gonna pour it. You'll need a big bowl that you'll pour each batch of your puree into. Use your spatula to get it all out. And then I'm going to continue doing this until I have all the pumpkin done, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, we are done with our pumpkin puree, so we're ready to load them onto our dehydrator trays. For this, you're going to need some silicone mats with an edged or raised border to contain the liquid or the puree. So we're just going to start loading it on. You want to pour it onto your trays in small batches because it's really hard to take it off, but you can always add more if you need it. You just want to get a thin, even layer. You don't want to get it too thick or else you'll end up with more of like a fruit leather, kind of like how those fruit roll-ups are at the store, and we don't want that. So this is what the tray looks like loaded up. A very thin layer, but as much of a solid layer as can be. So I'm going to continue pouring these on my trays. When I'm done, I'm going to set it in the dehydrator at 125 degrees Fahrenheit. The reason I dehydrate at 125 degrees is because it's a very low temperature, and the lower the temperature, the more nutrients you are preserving. But also, I almost always dehydrate overnight because it typically takes maybe 10 to 12 hours with purees or a really heavy water content product. As far as exactly how long, when it comes to dehydrating, temperature times are very dependent on your environment, whether it's humidity, increased humidity, decreased humidity, how much moisture this particular pumpkin had in it. So it's really hard to say, okay, dehydrate it for 7 hours or dehydrate it for 10 hours. You really just have to go until you can tell it's done, and I will give you some tips on how you can tell it's done when I pull it out of the dehydrator tomorrow and show you then. Okay, we are done dehydrating. They dehydrated overnight, and here's what it looks like. I'm going to peel it off the tray, and hopefully you can hear the snap noise it makes. I think you should be able to hear that. If you don't hear that snap noise, that's an indication that you probably need to dehydrate it longer. It's probably not quite done yet. That said, it is pliable. Next step is to grind it up and turn it into a powder. So let's talk about some options that you have here. Before I knew that this existed, this is the Vitamix dry container. And normally your Vitamix we'd be using for smoothies and soups and liquid-based objects or recipes. This canister is for dry ingredients. You can grind up wheat berries into flour. You can grind up oats into oat flour, and you can also grind up anything you dehydrate into a powder. The next option is one of those NutriBullets or like a Ninja bullet type blender. Those I hear do really, really well. I haven't tried that personally, but I am part of a lot of groups that focus on dehydrating and canning and all that, and a lot of people recommend the either Ninja or the NutriBullet. But any container that you use, you're just going to load up your pieces, and you can break them up as you put them in. So that was a whole tray, and I think we'll stop there. Go ahead and grind it. I will have to stop the grinding process a couple times and use a spatula to push down the sides throughout the process. Okay, here we go. Okay, I think we're good now. I'm going to pour this into a bowl real quick so you can see it better. Isn't that beautiful color? I love working with dried foods and powdering them because the color is just so vibrant. Not at all like the dull stuff you get at the store. Okay, this is beautiful. Okay, you can see we are at a very good powdered stage. There's still maybe just a little little bit of pieces in there, but that's okay because we are going to be reconstituting this into a puree, and so it's fine for there to be just a little bit of bigger pieces in there, but we're looking good. I am going to do that same step to the rest of my trays. I had 3 trays here. I don't know if you saw those earlier. I can't remember if I showed them to you. I'm going to process all of those, and then as promised, I will show you how we use pumpkin powder in our house, and it's delicious and has nothing to do with smoothies or oatmeal or all the boring stuff that we usually use fruit powders for. This one is very special, so I'll be back in just a minute. Now for the fun part, the actual cooking part. Now, one of the things that I hear a lot about when someone sees my pumpkin powder stash, like, what do you do with pumpkin powder? So the usual thing that comes to mind first is anything you would put pumpkin puree in, like cupcakes, muffins, maybe even cookies, but also just sprinkling it on top of oatmeal. But when I saw how many free pumpkins we were getting or could get just from friends and family, you know, a lot of people use them for decorations, and once that time of year is past, they don't need those pumpkins anymore. And you can get a lot for free that way. And when I saw how much I was getting, I figured out that I've got to find something that allows me to stretch regular meals with this pumpkin powder. That way, when it comes this time of year, I can stock a year's supply easily and use it not just for desserts, but to stretch lunches and suppers. And what I found was a pumpkin flatbread. It's like a skillet bread that you make in a skillet, and it comes together in about 5 minutes. I make this for my 3 children at lunch, and 1 cup of flour to 1 cup puree gives me 4 little flatbreads. So just use that as a reference point when you're trying to figure out how much you need to make. So first I'm just going to scoop out 1 cup of flour. And then we'll talk about how to reconstitute that powder. So I played around with how little amount can I use of this powder to still get a delicious flatbread, because, you know, I want to make this last as long as possible. And what I found is 3 tablespoons to 1 cup is about as low as you can go without losing that really delicious pumpkin taste. So 3 tablespoons to 1 cup. What I do is I just measure out 3 tablespoons directly in my 1 cup measuring cup. And then I start slowly adding water, about halfway full. And then I'll take a skinny spoon. If you have a skinny whisk, that would work well too. Let me push this over here. Hopefully you can see it better. And I just start stirring very gently. You don't want to slosh it all out. And you'll see it start thickening up. I'll try to bring it to the camera in just a minute when I'm done. I've already added the full 1 cup of water, so I'm not going to be adding any water. The more you stir it, the thicker it's going to get because that powder is fully incorporating into the water. Okay, here we are. Looking good. Smelling good. Okay. Here you can see the consistency. Now we're right back at pumpkin puree. Nice and thick. Now before I started filming, I cleaned off my counters really good. I disinfected it with a vinegar disinfectant because we're about to start kneading just a little bit, kneading some dough. But to your flour, you're going to add your pumpkin puree. I forgot to add my salt and pumpkin spice seasoning. I've done this before with cinnamon, and I've also done it plain, but this pumpkin spice seasoning is really good with it. I normally add that before I add the puree, but I've got some, just because it incorporates into the flour better, but I have some room over here where the puree hasn't incorporated into the flour yet, so I'm going to put it there. You're going to do a 1/2 teaspoon of your salt and a 1/2 teaspoon of whatever seasoning you like. And then we're going to incorporate it really good. Just mix it all together. In a minute, it's going to get too hard to do with a spatula, and I'm going to have to get in there with my hands. So you also want to wash your hands real good before you do this step. You just want to get it good and incorporated, just like if you were making a bread dough. Okay, here I go. It's not completely incorporated yet, but we'll finish up the rest in the next step. You're going to sprinkle your countertop with some flour. and start kneading it a little bit. Fold it over, push it in, fold it over, push it in. We're just going to do it a few times just to continue incorporating the flour. We don't necessarily need to we don't need to knead for softness reasons like you would for bread, but just to incorporate that pumpkin puree in really good. Also, just like bread dough, you're doing this so it's not too terribly sticky. So if you need to add more flour, like mine's sticking to my hands really bad, so I need to add a little bit more flour. Almost there. I see a little bit more flour that needs to be incorporated in. It's no longer sticky, so I'm going to move this excess flour out of the way. Okay, next step. So I'm going to cut it into 4 sections. Then we're just going to roll these into balls. Okay, so now we're going to flatten them out into discs. You can do these as thin or as thick as you like, but basically, to me, it feels like the same. Man, it's still sticky. Not too bad. It feels like the same size and shape as like a pancake. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and throw this one into the pan. Now at Food Prep Guide, one of our main goals is to help you prepare for hard times. And one of the ways that we prepare for hard times is learning how to stretch meals and how to feed bellies on a budget and still as healthy as possible, right? We don't want to cut corners, but we do need to save money. So how do we do that without sacrificing quality? Like I said, you can get a ton of pumpkins around this time of year. It's fall of 2020 at the time of this filming. So if you're watching later, just know it's the fall time. You can get a whole lot of pumpkins for free. You can dehydrate it, powder it, and then you can make this flatbread, just stretch meals all throughout the year. Now it's very similar to pancakes. We just let them cook for, it usually takes between 3 to 4 minutes per side, and then I will flip them and cook them another 3 to 4 minutes on the other side. As far as doneness, you're not going to see any bubbles pop up like you do with pancakes, but just know that these don't take hardly any time. So once you hit that 4-minute mark, you're probably safe to go ahead and flip it. But you can take your spatula and just lift up the bread and see if you've got kind of a golden, very slightly brown tint to the bottom of it, and that'll let you know that it's ready to flip. Okay, so I washed my hands, cleaned up just a little bit, and it's about time to flip them. I'm going to lift up my spatula just a little bit. Look at the bottom. Oh yeah. Let's see if I can pick this up. Hopefully you can kind of see that. It's just golden brown on the bottom. So they are ready to flip. And we're just going to cook them for 3 to 4 minutes longer on this side. Okay, it's been about 3 to 4 minutes on the other side, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the eye off. Take them out. Hot. They are very hot. And there we go. This is pumpkin puree, kind of like I think it's technically called a skillet bread, but it's very much like a flatbread. My children absolutely love it. Tear off a piece to be cooling. See that hot steam coming off of it. Oh, I can smell the pumpkin spice. Very good. It's a very dense bread. So good. If you haven't jumped on board with pumpkin powder yet because you didn't know how to use it, go for pumpkin puree skillet bread. I hope you enjoy. That's it for today, guys. Bye.